As a journalist who has covered the finance sector over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to interview and engage with some of the best minds in the space. Leaving big bank earnings reports to the boring traditional media firms, I'll focus on the tech-savvy apps, digital investing platforms, challenger banks, and payment giants to drive relevant content that looks forward to disruption instead of fearing it. I'm Nicole Casperson, Fintech journalist, and this is What the Fintech. Hi, everyone, and welcome to What the Fintech, the podcast for fintech professionals who are ready to shape the future of our industry with innovation and inclusion. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today I'm sitting down with Grace Mellis. She's the first ever CFO of Altruist, a Los Angeles-based fintech and the first fully integrated digital brokerage platform for financial advisors. Grace is bringing the heat to the fintech and wealthtech space, as she's made it her mission as CFO to ensure that diversity, inclusion, and equity continue to be woven into every facet of the company. I'm so thrilled to have her share her story, her insights, and her authenticity. She's a true rock star. Grace, welcome to What the Fintech.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. Tell me where you are at right now. You're working from home. Where are you based out of? How are things where you're at?
So we are mostly remote. So I am working from home out in Pasadena. So my dog may make an appearance somewhere in my background because I think we all have our pets wandering around no matter what these days. And yeah, it's been great. Altruist has been a really fun ride. I've been very excited to join the company.
Good. Yes. And I know it hasn't been that long, but I'm excited to get into that. But first, I do want to start learning a little bit about your personal background and diving into that a bit, because I do believe that is so critical to your success as a leader. So you come from immigrant parents with a background in financial services. Parents are Chinese immigrants. Your mom worked in C-suite roles in financial services, which is so cool. How have those experiences really shaped your values as a leader today?
Well, I think I was incredibly lucky that my mom, was one of the few women. She was at a Chinese American bank called East West Bank, and she was one of the early employees, and she was the CFO. And I don't know if you grow up when you're young, you're like, I never want to be my parents. And then you wake up one day, you're like, oh, wait, I'm my mom. But, in that way, she, was an incredibly male-dominated business and banking, and having that as a role model was, for me, I think, very important, and for my brother to see that women could be both moms, successful executives, help build businesses, and help communities that needed helping. And that's, really shaped the choices I've made and the things that I've done in my life. So, props to my parents for all they went through, because they came here with not a lot, right? They barely spoke English. It's amazing. My son and I had this conversation the other day. He's like, yeah, there's this guy in my class. He said he just moved, to the States, a year ago, and his English is flawless. And, you don't think about that, how hard it is to move to a foreign country, to actually go to school in a language that's not your first language, and to actually go and succeed in a career. All those hurdles are things that, are incredibly admirable for everyone who's doing that around the world today.
Totally. I think folks, especially when you're from the States, you don't always think about just that inherent challenge, right? If you're not from the States and you have to learn English, or, have to learn the cultural norms here, you're already, at a different place, right? And you're coming from such a different perspective and a different view of everything, because you're kind of having to reshape yourself to fit someone else's culture. And that, I think, we don't always give it the credit that it deserves, I feel, especially in the States. We're kind of spoiled a little bit here when it comes to adjusting, right, to other people's cultures.
It is. And it's also English speakers who come to the US who, come from different cultures. Because I had somebody who told me she moved from Jamaica to New York, and she was like, I was stopped and told I was too smiley. There were things I shouldn't be doing. She's like, I didn't know there were rules to being from my culture. I didn't know there were different ones. I was just me. And apparently there are rules in the States that I didn't know about. And so I think some of those things are things we all navigate. And, how do you fit in and how much do you choose to be a chameleon, and how much do you choose to celebrate where you're from? I think it's a real balance.
Totally. And what's so cool about just today and today's environment is that I think we are, especially in the fintech and wealth tech world, right? It's all about embracing those differences, embracing, diversity of thought and diversity across all sectors, so that we can create those innovative products and build those tools and do the digital transformations. I just said that word. Yes, I did. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like, to do all of the things that it takes, to build the goal of fintech, which is to bring financial freedom and accessibility to everyone, no matter what profession you're hitting, no matter what your end consumer is. But anyway, I digress. I do love your background and passion for storytelling as well. I believe it's such a key component for any successful business. You've gone from working as a journalist for CNN during the O.J. Simpson trial to a leading female in the fintech space, so you might just be my new hero. But talk to us about that connection and how your strength in storytelling really fuels your ability to build those strong teams.
Well, it's interesting because I think that, it's actually also connected to the diversity question that you talked about in terms of diversity of thought. Diversity of career brings different parts of yourself to your career. And I think that storytelling is as they say, as old as the hills, right? Whether you are a court jester or somebody back in the day, that's how people connect. Before there was paper, before there were pens, before there was a printing press, there were stories. And stories are really what bring people together and connect people. So how you tell stories is incredibly important, whether it's the story and origin of a founder in a company or a story and origin of what's going on in terms of, our news. And I was fortunate enough to, back in the day, work at CNN and CNBC. And so I did cover the OJ trial. I still remember running in the back lot after the reporter that was mine, Sean Caleb's was my reporter. And I was like, you run after the car to stop them, right? So I'm running after, Marsha Cross and Chris Darden and their Lexus SC400 in the back lot behind the LA courthouse, while, the big reporters and people got, Jimmy Cochran in the front half of the courthouse, and trying to stop the car and saying, throwing the mic in the window while the cameraman runs behind and the reporter sticks his face in to get the question in. So, you learn a lot of hustle. You learn that everything doesn't need to be perfect, pretty, in corporate America. I think it's very different from startups. And a lot of people struggle to adjust, I think, from big jobs in large corporates to startups, which require you to kind of have that hustle. You got to be okay with, like, yeah, we got to solve a problem. Sure, I'll come in. We'll handwrite the checks we need to. We'll, manually do whatever we have to. It's not about like, oh, well, if you can't have it all printed up pretty and it's all not in a box, then we can't get it done. Ooh, we're stuck. You don't have that luxury in a startup. You don't have that luxury in a newsroom. You just have to hustle. So I think learning that piece of it is incredibly important. And then how you communicate what you're doing, what your company is doing, and also internally to your employees. How do you motivate employees to all, sort of move towards the same goal, right? It's really about simplicity of thought, clarity of goals. It's about communication. The majority of costs in any company are the human resource. They're the people. So if you don't know how to communicate to them, how are you going to get anything done? I think it's really, so that's where I took all those learnings. And I was super lucky. I got to work in Hong Kong. I studied abroad. I got to work for CNN and CNBC in Hong Kong, as well as the States. I got to see the rest of the world, and being able to live in different countries. I lived in Hong Kong for 2 years. I lived in England for 15. I got to travel around Europe and work with heads of businesses and people from all over the world. And me having to go to those countries and having to navigate, how do you get from one place to the next? I was a student in Hong Kong. I don't have cash to go buy, taxi rides all the time. You have to figure out how to use the escalators and the mini cabs and shout out in Cantonese, like, stop here, let me out. And then in London, I was like, I don't know where the buses go. This is this is when Nokia's phone had Snake on it. Like, there's bus maps, and you can't really sit on like the number 9 bus on the top and go like, where exactly am I going in London? You kind of just have to ride the bus and figure out where it goes. And then, all the different routes, and you're like, oh, now I can get myself around. So learning how to be somewhere else, learning how to navigate, it brings a lot of humility to you, because you realize as a person, like, oh, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm not, doing everything that's the way I expect it. I'm in another culture, in their cultural norms, and I got to figure out how to navigate that. And I think that's really helped me in my career, just connect with people, and connecting is the key.
Connecting is the key. We're going to put that on some merch, guys. I love that quote. It's going to say, connecting is the key. Quotable by Grace Mellis of Altruist. I love that. There's so many things to give you kudos to. Kudos to being a part of the O.J. Simpson trial and being on kind of the front lines as a journalist who used to like run up to cars and like actually have to like run. In my time of being a journalist, the most exercise I get are like I'm really fast at typing for the most part. So I've lived in the internet age of journalism. So things are slightly different there. So kudos to that, and to all of the travel. That is so critical. And I think, when you go to a place and you're feeling like your own stability is like a little disrupted, right? Because you don't know where the metro is going, or you don't have, Google Maps. Even if you do have Google Maps, it's still kind of hard. Like I struggled to even find some places in New York City, and I've lived here for 4 years, but when you feel that disruption within yourself, there is kind of something cool to think about how we use the word disruption in fintech too, right? Or wealth tech. And there's like an interesting correlation there, right? It's like we're disrupting something old to bring in something new as well. And it's just like, it's just cool. When you said that and then told me about your experiences, it felt very aligned with like what fintech and wealth tech is and its mission and what it's doing,
Yeah. And it's, and I think disruption is, the phenomenal thing that a lot of the startups in the US and around the world are doing, right? They're taking old traditional structures that we have taken for granted, and they're turning them on their heads and saying, why not? And, back to this question of being a journalist is learning how to ask questions, right? When I was in Hong Kong, I got to know the bureau chief for the Washington Post. And he was like, okay, you speak Mandarin. I was like, enough. And he's like, come be my translator for the presidential elections in Taiwan. I was like, okay, but now I need to learn a whole new vocabulary, right? What's a missile? How do you ask somebody on the street? Like, are you scared of the missiles that are flying across? Like, what are you afraid of? And just being okay learning and asking questions. I think that's what we apply to the business models too. If you bring in people, I was talking to somebody else yesterday about like hiring people who are just different, think differently, that companies are more powerful when you do that. Why? Because if you do that, and we were talking about the trucking industry, he's like, I brought in somebody who is completely diverse, and they were like, was doing brand somewhere. And I was like, why'd you do that? And he was like, it was amazing. Like, this guy brought in a totally different view in a very staid industry. And Jason and the team at Altruist is doing the same thing in the RIA space. It's saying, well, why not? Why can't we lower the cost? Why can't we help the end consumer? Why can't we actually give an app to our RIAs to give to the end consumer? Why do we have to expect that our RIAs know how to build all that tech? We want them to build their small businesses and get, as much wealth creation and generation for their end customers as possible. So why don't we give them the tools to do that? Right. So, that's why I would say that as an end-to-end solution, Altruist is thinking about things differently. And that's what attracted me to Altruist. It's about this, not just the storytelling and not just about the question asking, but it's also about the disruption that you mentioned.
Oh, so amazing. I love that. And perfect segue into jumping into Altruist and what's going on over there. I do love the Altruist mission, which you've alluded to, of bringing that sophisticated technology to small business owners, basically RIAs. So for our listeners that maybe are not as familiar with the wealth tech space, will you just give us a brief overview of Altruist today and the opportunity gap that it is filling?
Yeah, so Altruist is founded by a third-time founder, our fearless CEO, Jason Wank, who actually was an RIA himself. So he started out actually managing money as a registered investment advisor. So this is not just your certified financial planner. This is somebody who has a registration with the SEC, who has a fiduciary responsibility. And he came from Morgan Stanley. A lot of the RIAs have come from other big wirehouses and other companies and set up shop. Why? Because they want to deliver value to the end customers. And so this space has been exploding over the past decade. From about 4,000 of these 10 years ago, there are about 44,000. And no different than anything else we're seeing in America. I think it's the trend of wanting to run your own business. It's wanting to do the best thing for your community. It's wanting to create and own your own business and do the right thing. And that's what motivates a lot of people to separate and move on from, the large wirehouses or wherever they have been before to start this up, because they want to combine, all the wealth of resources and knowledge that they have put together to help people plan for the future, have, the wealth that they can to retire. And that's what, RIAs do. Altruist is building a vertical stack to support these RIAs as they see this kind of explosive growth and are incredibly independent while they're doing it, right? So there are very few large custodians out there that they have to use currently. And most of them just give them a piece of the puzzle, right? Or they are an aggregator where they aggregate lots of other services and they get discounts for you, almost like sourcing discounts, right? So, but no one's actually said, hey, we're going to build you a platform that's like end to end that allows you to actually show your clients' portfolios, give your customers an app. I don't know if you've invested, but like, in funds or with planners in the past, but, I look at my parents and they get like the quarterly report, right? Once a quarter, and they see what's happened. And, like you were saying, in terms of how journalism has changed, I think fintech is disrupting, how people expect their financial services. Our banks give us apps. We can see everything every day. But actually, a lot of asset management is still quite antiquated. You've got to log in. You've got to actually go somewhere to find this information, and you have to wait for a statement. And these are things that still have to be, disrupted. And what Altruist is doing is doing just that. We're helping our customers and we're helping our RIAs, do more, do better, do faster, and at a much, much, much cheaper cost, which is one of the key important things that we're doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, and cost efficiency is huge when it comes to technology and the fintech space, and and transparency and fees and all of that crazy stuff. Honestly, in the RIA space is so prominent today. But I love it. Like I said, love the mission. And honestly, I've said it once and I will say it again. I love the advisory space for fintech disruption, and I love wealth tech because there's just still so much white space left. And I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, March 2020, I was reporting on like technology adoption numbers by advisors, like with people excited that DocuSign was finally being adopted in like huge percentages. And it's like, oh gosh. And then, fast forward to today, as we are, I don't know, I don't like to call it post-pandemic, but that's kind of what it's being called. But that's the big difference, right? They're now accepting fintech. They're now willing to adopt it, and I'm of the belief that if more RIAs and more financial advisors and planners, wealth managers adopt fintech, then to make their lives easier, to make their work easier, then they can open up that access to more individuals, more people that deserve to have a human advisor, a part of their kind of community and village, right, to help build their wealth. So that's kind of the beauty of how fintech and technology and maturing tech can help the RIA space and advisors. But so that might kind of tie into some of the competitive advantages of Altruist as like a fintech startup over an incumbent brokerage or custodian. But talk to me about some of those that you really see after being a part of the team for, what has it been now? 5 months-ish?
Yeah, a little bit over,
Yeah.
And it's been a great ride. I think the advisory space, as you say, is slowly adopting, new technology, and DocuSign, being one of them. And it's funny because we partner with Vanguard, and one of the advisors there was talking about how they do migrations. And they were saying, look, the painful part of moving client accounts is that usually you're in a room with like literally papers everywhere and sticky notes that you have to like, and FedEx boxes, because you have to send out for every single account. You've got to send a document with a sticky note with signature pages. And then you've got to like literally every single account has to be put into that FedEx and sent to each customer. So every time they do a migration, it's like weeks long preparation of papers, paper everywhere, sticky notes everywhere, and making sure it's probably worse than the tax process, which I don't know if that can be. So if you imagine your tax preparer, like, I think that, bringing this type of innovation to their space is incredible because it actually gives them much more time to actually think about how they generate alpha for their end customers and how they actually, to your point, acquire more customers, find more people to help. And those are really critical parts of what Altruist does. And, what I've loved about the team and joining is it's a pretty incredible team. The team itself, from our head of product to our CTO to pretty much everyone, our head of brand, it's not their first startup, right? It's startup 2 or 3, you're having a discussion of, okay, how do we do things better than we did them in the prior startup? How do we do things better than in our past experiences? Everybody's coming to Altruist because they're like, we have this vision of how fintech can help people, how it can be done better, and how the culture of the company can also be incredibly supporting of that journey. Mm-hmm. Culture is, I'm sure we've all been in lots of different kinds of companies, but when, your CEO and executive team put culture first and kindness first, mm-hmm. and kindness, not just being nice, but kindness of giving true feedback, kindness of really actually thinking about your employees and how they are actually, where they are in their age and stage in life and how we support them. These are things that most companies get to very late in a startup, and Altruist is doing them while they're just coming out of beta. And that to me is incredibly impressive.
And it's so cool. And it's so smart. I think that's where a lot of transformation, in a sense, is happening in fintech, wealth tech, for startups, for anyone, honestly, in business across the board, right? Folks are realizing like, oh man, it's the great resignation, right? Like, oh man, I have to take care of my people and my culture first. And then that creates that sustainable foundation to build up, right? To scale, to do all those things. So the fact that Altruist is putting that first, right? And that's clear, right? Between the folks that you partner with, the representation at your company, having someone like yourself as CFO, right? All those things matter. Those decisions are so important. And they, and I love and appreciate that Jason has really, been intentional and deliberate about those steps. And I know that someone like yourself wouldn't, join a company like Altruist unless that was true, And so, kudos to you guys and everything you're doing out there. Kind of tying back into, the transparency theme. RIAs do hold themselves as fiduciaries and champions of that transparency. So will you kind of share how Altruist really upholds this value with its fees and its services? Because I think that's just something that, speaking of communication, has been so much more on the forefront in, honestly, all industries.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, financial services in many ways has been undergoing a lot of scrutiny, with fees and transparency, even on the retail side, right? Checking and savings accounts and everybody on the high street wanting to understand what they're going to get charged for. And also, all the neobanks saying, well, why do we charge people for these fees? I think that in the RIA space, some of these fees probably haven't been examined for a very long time. And if we're no longer custodying assets and actual physical certificates, and we're not actually transporting things from place to place anymore in terms of actual, assets, like what's the true cost in a lot of what you're doing, right? It's bits and bytes of data. Now there is a cost to that data on the cloud and moving it around and all of that kind of stuff, but there's been a drastic reduction in a lot of these types of things, but yet the platforms still are looking to charge thousands of dollars. And so if you're using multiple platforms as an advisor, that can add up quite quickly. And so, what Altruist wants to do is basically take that all in one. So we did it vertically, and we basically said, look, your first 100 accounts are free. And then you pay us $1. So effectively, if you're on our platform for your portfolio advisory services, what you're really paying for is access to Vanguard, BlackRock, Dimensional, and even Altruist simplified portfolios. If you're on our portfolios that we've designed, those are free. So we are trying to actually radically reduce costs so that RIAs can spend more time actually working for their clients to generate alpha for their clients and for their savings. And to your point on the diversity, it's the diversity of our RIAs. There are RIAs on our platform who couldn't start their businesses anywhere else because they would be required to have a certain asset, sort of assets under management before they could do that. And, we've been talking about the really interesting people that have come on board. There is, one asset manager, her entire goal is to help families save for fertility issues. We are working, with the Onyx platform, and they are looking to basically educate marginalized, communities on how to become an RIA, how to actually, get all your certifications, how to apply, because the process to be an RIA is not easy, right? You actually have to apply to the SEC. It's a 6-month process. You have to actually set up an office. There's a lot that goes into this, and then you have to get compliance done. And it's not something that can be taken lightly, especially if you've just been an employee running a thing. There's a large corporate that takes care of all the legal and HR and everything else that's structural behind you. To do this can be incredibly daunting. And so, being able to support folks who are looking to actually educate RIAs on how to do this, and for us to actually educate RIAs, not just how to break away, but how to get to their first 10, 20, 100 million, those are huge passion projects of both Altruist and our founder. And it's a huge goal for the company, and it's really incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so cool. And I think, the niche RIA and advisory space is booming, right? More so than ever before. Folks want to consume information, or they want to have their services, or they want their information or pieces of advice, whether financial or whatever it is, from someone that they trust and feels like has their values, someone that has the fintech on the side so that they have the ability to actually look them in the eye and listen to them and do all that good stuff. So I love that you guys cater to that, because that mission is just so important, right? It's back to that small business owner, in a sense, a mission that I think we are all, after seeing so many shut down because of the pandemic, right? We don't want to see that happen again, whether you're an RIA in the financial advice space, or, looking at your favorite restaurant or, boutique shop or whatever it is, right? You don't want to see those businesses close. So, we have to give them all the tools necessary to survive. And, financial advice and RIAs are no different, and who they can cater to. It's been so cool throughout the last few years I've covered the space, seeing the different stories, niche advisors, people that cater to certain things, specifically women that are used to saving for building wealth for fertility reasons. That's so cool. What in the world? I love that we have that. And so kudos again to you guys and the story that you guys are telling and helping others tell. But you do have a lot of experiences mentoring those startups, as you said, and that's kind of what apparently is a good ingredient to the Altruist team. So what's the common thread between the startups that you've seen achieve success?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good question, because it's actually one of the reasons why I started advising and working with startups. So I've been involved with startups out of Tech Day LA, Techstars, and a number of others that I've sort of worked with, invested in, and companies I sit on the boards of. And I think that's been the question I've always been asking myself. And that's part of the reason why I've been on that journey is, getting a sample set, because you can't really read a pitch deck and really understand whether a company is going to succeed or not. You can't just look at numbers and a spreadsheet and see if a company is going to succeed or not. The total addressable market, or TAM, that people talk about, that's super important. It's the reason why people invest. But if you talk to any investor from seed stage up to the large VCs, what they'll tell you is it's the people. And it takes us back to actually what we were talking about is you've got to have the right people, and the founders that succeed and the teams that succeed are teams. They're not one person, I was thinking about the Greek soccer team when they won the European Cup in like 2004. There was like, mass hysteria. It was like so much excitement. Like all of London was super busy up near Bayswater because that's a large Greek community. There were people like flags everywhere. And they were so excited because the Greek soccer team had no superstars, zero, right? They had no Messi. They had no big English Premiership football player, but they won. And they won because they played as a team. They passed, whereas a lot of the other country teams, they put together all these superstars. And we see it with the NBA players that play in the Olympics. They put all these superstars together, and yet they're all trying to win themselves or score the goal themselves and not playing as a team. And I think that when you put together the right team, whether it's in sports or in fintech or in business in general, you are able to actually lift a lot more, do a lot more, because no one's trying to be a superstar on their own. And I think that to me, I was the founder of Zoom was talking to John Chambers, and he was talking about when he was working at Cisco, and he was like an engineer down in the bowels of WebEx. And he was like, look, John, you taught me about when to recognize when there's an inflection point, when I should be, investing in it. And that's when, WebEx wasn't it. It was too high in security and all these kinds of things. But, years later, there was AWS and there was cloud computing. And I realized I could do this. And John looked at him in the eye, and it was a great fireside chat. And he said, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets credit. He said, thank you very much, Eric, but it's not about you, right? It's not about when because he spent the whole time talking about team. And he's like, you never said it was about you, but your leadership style is such that you were able to accomplish so much more because you are able to give credit and see credit and lift people up that work with you. And so when you don't care about that credit, it's incredible how much you and a company can achieve.
Ooh, that was awesome. What a great answer to a great question. I have like chills from that. I love everything that you just said. And I'm a part of a startup right now, and so when I hear that, it makes me think and reflect on even my own actions and what I can do better, right? And what we can all do better. And that's kind of understand that like these are team efforts, and we have to all work together. And I think that's something that, the fintech industry is just maybe getting a little bit more used to, right? Like it's not necessarily like fintech versus other things, right? A lot of the times it's fintech being able to partner with other things, fintech being able to help, integrate other things. So it's like that story, like whether you're a startup or, maybe you do work for a big firm or whatever it is, like if you're in a team, it's about, being okay with everyone getting the credit or not caring where it comes from, or just like wanting to lift the boat no matter what position you're in. And that's how everyone succeeds. So I love that. I'm getting that on a t-shirt as well. I'm so glad we have this on the record. I have so much future merch to drop with my guests. So thank you, Grace, for giving me all the good quotes. So another thing I want to ask is kind of going back to culture and values. How do you navigate, and maybe from, just the CFO position and just being in the C-suite, right? How do you navigate scaling that fast-growing fintech like Altruist while keeping your culture and values intact, and maybe more so just like for you and like the team that you lead yourself from that perspective? Yeah.
Yeah, I think scaling is, again, you like asking these tough questions. These are, and they're really good, thoughtful ones, because they are ones that I spend a lot of time thinking about, right? Like, how do you ensure new team members, feel included and loved and brought in and part of the culture when we're all starting from remote and starting from home? How do you, ensure that you're onboarding people and managing the team in a way that helps you do that. And I think we have to, fintech has to use tools too. And I think we were talking about this just before we kicked off was, our company has this thing called Donut on our Slack, and it like literally matches us up for like, coffee chat with, random people in the company. And so we get to meet people at all different levels. And I think we have to use those tools, in this new environment on how we actually sort of make people feel included and how we actually touch base. You have to be much more intentional about your one-on-one meetings. You have to be really structured actually and thoughtful about how you sort of put, sort of plans in place in terms of bringing people on board. But it is something that I worry about. Like this is, I was on another fireside chat. I guess I did a lot of these this year during COVID and last year, right? And Jamie Dimon, because I worked at JP Morgan for a very long time, was addressing the point that he was getting a lot of flack for wanting people to be back in the office. And it's like, hey, it's super easy for you, for me, for those of us who've been working for a really long time to do this. We can establish relationships. We can figure out the list. We can bring people on, and we can have conversations and get stuff done. But imagine and remember when you were 22, when you were 25, when you're in your first job, when you're in your second job, and you're starting out and you're like, how did you learn? How did you actually, how did managers figure out who was the cream to rise to the top? And how did you learn? What did you do with your discretionary time? If you're on the M&A desk, say in a bank, but you get in early because your buddy's on the FX desk and you're going to go listen to the economist at 7 a.m, you get to learn by being around or being in the room when your MDs are having a discussion, or when you're a journalist on the floor, you're in the room when people are talking about the interview questions and how you're going to actually ask them. That's how you learn to be a better journalist. That's how you're going to learn to be a better, banker. That's how you're going to learn to be a better employee, or even management consultant. Like, how do you do that? And so I think, it was a really interesting question he sort of posed, because it made us all who are, alumni and ex-MDs take a deep breath and have a think about, like, really, how do we use, I guess, tools or whatever it is. And when do tools fail us? And when do we actually need to spend time in person? So how do we use offices maybe? And what Altruist has done is instead of using them for people to come in, most people are mostly working from home. We're having on-sites. So I guess off-sites are no longer the cool thing. It's an on-site. You're coming in the office, you're bringing people together. You're actually having a meal. You're breaking bread. You're solving a problem. It's important. And you've got to bring those junior people in too, because how else are they going to learn? And how are they going to, sort of learn faster or grow faster? And how are the managers going to figure out who are the people who are going to do more and who should they promote at year end when they don't see them? So like, these are all things that we all have to think about now in this new world of work, because I do think post-pandemic, even if we're somewhat not quite post, some degree of working from home is here forever. And it's not going to go away. So we have to think about how we adapt to that, especially for people coming out of college.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it's so interesting. And I kind of love thinking about from the perspective of future employees that are coming out of college, right? You're right. I was the biggest office junkie. When the pandemic first happened, I could not wait. I was like, okay, this is just going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be fine. And then I was like, okay, it's just going to be a month. This is going to be fine. I need the office. I felt like I needed the energy of a newsroom. I loved hearing my colleagues on the phone on interviews and us, the fast pace. And I wasn't chasing cars, during the OJ Simpson trial, but I was yelling on the phone and doing all that fun stuff and hearing the chatter. And it's so funny because I had those experiences. Now I don't mind not having them as much, or if I like that on-site's the new cool thing, or if I do go on site for something or be involved or whatever, then it's extra stimulating now as opposed to extra draining, right? Before you did things in person and it felt almost draining, and now it's the opposite. That's so cool to think about how that's changed now in our world.
Yeah. And I'd love to imagine, it's going to be a really interesting question. Back end of next year, we should catch up, right? And see where is everybody? Are people thirsting to be have human contact again and be in the office more? Yeah. Or are they still dude, I'm cool working from home? Or is it just going to find a level? Because I think it's going to be an interesting mix, right? Yeah, because I lived in England when I had my first child, and it was very funny because I remember thinking, well, you get this maternity leave, and everybody's like, oh yeah, Europe, it's great, you get maternity leave. I was like, dude, that's when I realized I'd be a terrible stay-at-home mom. Like I love working, right? Like I was dialing in on my BlackBerry and still listening, still sort of joining in on calls and not wanting to be fully disconnected. And then you learn to like with your second, like, okay, like how to balance all of that kind of stuff and knowing that you actually have to be present for more people than just your employees. You actually have to be present for your children, and you have to be present for, everybody else in your life and your partner and whatever it is. And so learning that balance is also a journey we go through in our lives and careers. So when you have more discretionary time to learn and in your 20s and you're in the office or a newsroom and you're able to do all that, that's the time to suck down all that sort of, amazing sort of information and experience, because that's what sustains you when you've got to actually balance and you don't have the luxury anymore of that being the only thing you do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly. Outside of donut meetups or the app Donut, where you have coffee meetups with your virtual colleagues, when you think about heading into 2022, what are other areas of the business that you're most excited about, maybe expanding, or is there like a milestone that you're so looking forward to achieving with Altruist? Anything around there. I almost dare to say crypto, but we can go a conversation without talking about it, unless you want to bring it up. But feel free to go a complete other way on what excites you in 2022.
Well, it's actually really funny that word did come up in conversation very recently. But I think the first milestone is time. How do we give more time back to our RIAs, right? Like, and that's the one thing that we have done, right? Our sign up process, we talked about all that paperwork. What I love is, the fact that our advisors keep coming back to us and saying like, hey, I can have coffee and a meeting with Nicole, and then I can like literally open her account and then move on to my next meeting. And whereas in the past, I would be able to have like maybe two meetings, in that 5-day period, or 3 meetings. And then I'd spend the rest of the week doing paperwork, having account openings and chasing information and spending a lot of time doing that. He's like, most of them now can do that and then get on with getting more clients and helping more clients and answering more questions and doing their job. So I think extending that piece of the platform to migration so that people can get on our platform faster, and so they can actually open more accounts faster or migrate existing accounts faster is, on the roadmap of something that we really want to simplify that back end process. The other part of it is being able to manage larger teams on our platform. And that's super exciting for us, right? Being able to actually sort of delegate team management and not just being your own sole proprietor RIA, but some of them as they grow, they need to manage larger teams. And that's sort of on our roadmap as well. Crypto is a conversation that we are also having and we just, we launched sort of some OTC, crypto. So we do have it live. So our advisors can actually put some allocation against that. And it's actually really interesting because a lot of people don't understand the crypto space, right? There's actual wallets, there's actual purchasing by end customers. There's using the traditional platforms that people now think are traditional, right? But Coinbase, and others haven't been around that long, Kraken, Binance, whatever. But there's not been really good solutions for advisors, right? Because most of those solutions require the end consumer to actually own the wallet and to do the 2FA and to do all of those things. So I think for us, it's thinking about how do we build that for advisors so they can do OBO, so they can help their customers invest, so they can do portfolio allocations to another asset class. So that's how we're thinking about it. And that's what I'm excited about, which is actually changing the game to actually support advisors in this journey, not just sort of, the end consumer who can do it on their own and who may be very terrified of doing it on their own because they just don't understand the process.
Oh, exactly. And it's so important to get more advisors educated, more advisors able to have this access so that they can help that end consumer because crypto's great. We love crypto, but we also do need, things in place to make sure that everyone is safe and well protected and can have all the fun that they want to have with this very innovative asset class. I think I'm smelling a on-ramp and Altruist, some more collabs in the future on that, but I don't necessarily have to grill you on that. Heading into a little bit of the representation aspect, towards the end of our conversation, I do like to jump into, women in leadership roles that are clearly underrepresented in the fintech space. So for you, being a female in the C-suite in a male-dominated field, it does come with a unique set of challenges. What are maybe some of your tips for getting past things like imposter syndrome or keeping your mental health in check? Or, is there anything at Altruist that helps you just kind of get through, your own day-to-day or help create those, progressive processes to help the world be a better place?
It's, I would say Altruist is great and Jason's great because the way he actually set it up for all of the leaders to come into their roles, there wasn't a lot of legacy. So what you find in a lot of startups is, especially in the finance space, they're like, "Oh, we raised some money. Can somebody find me a bookkeeper?" And then, then I got some more. I've got a board, like I've got some larger investors. I've got board decks. Can somebody find me somebody who's done FP&A? And then by the time they get to a CFO, there's like this legacy group of people who've been around, since the beginning and who are somewhat maybe discomforted by the fact that there's somebody else that's going to come in above them. And that's not how Altruist is built. Jason was very intentional. And he basically said, look, we're going to outsource these things and then we're going to bring in a leader and let them build their own teams. And he did that for HR. He did that for product. He's done that across the company. And I think that's part of the reason why, people are happy and they love the company. And actually, when we get referrals, they're usually like, "Oh yeah, my friend works there, loves this place. I don't know why they love a place in fintech, but they love their job. And so I really am interested in this new role that you're posting." Right. So I would say choose companies who do put culture first. That's one. I do think that as a woman, for me, I actually, it's funny, when I was younger, I did a lot of, I guess, more traditional, sort of dance and ballet and Chinese folk dancing and all these types of things. And when I got to college, I was like, I never really played a sport. So I rowed crew and I played rugby because they were new. And I was like, ooh, this is fun. And there was one day I couldn't row crew. And this girl who was in my dorm was like, "Oh, I'm the captain of the rugby team. You should play rugby." I'm like, "What's rugby? I don't even know." And so, but the time worked in my schedule and because my labs were in the afternoon. So I started playing rugby, which was like 7 a.m. And, picking a sport also gives you a way to sort of relate to people. And I do remember when I was in London, like it's a very big, rugby is a very big guy sport. And when you're in a bank, all the big guys and they'd be like, and I was like, "I play rugby." And they're like, "They'd say what?" And there's a different level of respect, right? You're connecting with people in a different way. And then you have this other conversation. You're like, "Yeah, you may be bigger than me, but rugby's all about physics," right? So rugby, unlike American football, is if your knee touches the ground and you must release the ball. So all I need to do is to get you to get your knee in the ground. So there are 2 ways to do that. I can wrap my hands, like American football, you tackle high, right around the waist. It's really hard to move something that high. But think about tackling somebody while they're running at the ankles. They're going to fall.
Yeah.
And you don't even need to actually move their ankles that close together. So if you think about it, if you're walking by and like your cousin taps your ankle and you're out, you're going to tumble, right? And so I always used to joke at work. I'm like, it's all about physics. You can be bigger than me, but I can still take you down. and I think, finding ways to sort of joke, be funny, connect, but also in a way that for them, that was a sport they understood. I think that always lightened the situation. So I would say, how do you lighten the situation when you need to get something done, but it might be heavy? So you disarm people. you then, I'm giving my secrets away. Should I stop now? But like,
Never. The secrets away.
But you sort of and you get personal. People that you think that you might have conflict with, if you get to meet their spouse, ask their spouse like, "Hey, how do you manage them?" in front of them, and have, because it's really fun listening to what their spouse will say about them, right? And you learn a lot about people that way, right? You learn these secret, like, I just did that. I just did this the other day, just so you know. And this very strong woman's husband was like, "Well, we have this thing at home. Is it a 5-cent issue or a dollar issue? So it's a 5-cent issue. I'm not going to lay down my life for it. But if it's a dollar issue, I was like, ooh, now I know. If I'm ever in that place with her, I'll be like, this is a dollar issue, right? Like we need to take, and you're really finding ways to what I would call is diffuse, disarm, and include. And those are the things that I would say are my tips and tricks to try and sort of bring people together. Because going head on, it's like a train on a track, right? Sometimes to get to your destination, if you're going head on, it's kind of better to pull that track lever and go by at speed than doing this, because you can always come back and sort of, fix the problem, attack it a different way. But if you go head on and crash, there's kind of no recovery. So. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's official. Grace is on my team for the Squid Games. If that is something that I ever end up in, I hope not, but Grace is who you pick, right? You pick the one that understands that physics is more important than brutal strengths and smarts. So that's what I gathered from that. But all jokes aside, that is a lot of amazing information. Thank you for sharing your secrets, if you will, with us. It means a lot. And for me, a big point of my podcast is I want folks and professionals in the space to hear these pieces of advice from someone like yourself and say, hey, like I can apply that to myself and I can make my business better by doing that. So thank you so much, Grace, for sharing all of this information, so much amazingness in one episode. I will ask final thoughts. I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Grace, please tell us what the F we can expect from you or Altruist next.
I think we can expect Altruist to continue to go from strength to strength, to grow, to do more for our fintech and our financial RIA advisors. We're going to support all the new advisors out there who want to start their own business. And we are excited to be on this journey with you, Nicole.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. That is a wrap on this episode of What the Fintech. Thank you again to Grace for joining us. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can find me on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, talk to you soon.